Today, in Victoria 3, I challenge history. In 1836, Poland didn't exist on the map, its lands torn apart by Russia, Austria and Prussia. Great powers, nearly untouchable, but today I will lead Poland to rise once more from the ashes. My mission: reclaim every lost territory and revive the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth in just 100 years. It will require masterful diplomacy and cunning maneuvering to play the giants against one another. The transformation of Poland into an industrial titan capable of building a modern army. Will this impossible mission end in success? Let's find out. How cheap can games be on ENEBA? Even cheaper with this code, you'll definitely find something for yourself. Promo links and more info in the description. Recommended by Lookas. Welcome imperialists, Lookas here. According to the poll I ran recently, you want to see a free Poland. But don't worry, the other scenarios will also be recorded at some point. That's why I have to start this campaign by playing as Russia, because the province with Warsaw is located on Russian territory and it's necessary to release Poland. Then I just need to switch to diplomatic actions and open the vassal tab to release Poland, making sure to select that I want to play as it and that it should be an independent country. Of course, if you want to make things easier for yourself, it's worth building up the area a bit as Russia at the start, or releasing independent nations like Ukraine or Belarus, which will later be able to conquer easily. But for me, that's too big of an exploit, borderline cheating, and it would definitely be boring to watch. That's why I'll start the game with only 4 provinces, and with no chance of expanding territory for the next 14 years, because that's how long the defense pact between the 3 countries, the so-called Holy Alliance, will last. During that time, I'll still have plenty of work to do reforming Poland, since all the government reforms and technologies I've inherited are straight from Russia, including the toilets. Poland is still stuck in serfdom, with no police, no schools and no hospitals, and the military consists of a peasant levy. In terms of technology, especially industrial, we're seriously lagging behind, but at least I'll be able to found one company sometime soon. When it comes to society, things aren't looking great either. Look at this, the lower class has an income below 8, meaning they're basically on the edge of poverty. And that class makes up the majority of Poland's population. Obviously, that has a really negative impact on population growth, though we do have a decent number of people, 5.5 million. Poland is also considered a minor power, and at least that will work in our favor initially. But you'll see why later on. Still, the worst part is literacy. 13%, that's absolutely terrible, and it means Poland only generates 50 innovation points, which affects our research speed, as well as the natural spread of technology. There's really a lot I need to do with this country. I'll start with reforms, since those take some time, and first of all, with the power structure, because I noticed that as Poland I have a decent chance to introduce voting based on wealth. Granted, at first that won't weaken the landowners, actually it might strengthen them. But over time, the more factories I build, the stronger the industrialists will get, the more universities and administration buildings I put up, the stronger the intelligentsia will become. So I'm introducing this law with long-term goals in mind. Since Poland has a lot of authority, we are after all still an autocratic monarchy, I'll first use those points for decrease, especially the social mobility in all provinces. That way, even without an education system, our literacy will begin to grow. The road maintenance decree, which will help me build faster, I'll place in Lublin and Warsaw, where I'll be focusing initial industrial development. The migration decree only for Warsaw. And the resource industry decree, also only for Warsaw. I'll save 200 points for something else. As for research and technology, first up is the atmospheric engine. From experience, I've learned that higher resource output is even more important than tools. Next, I'll go for steel tools and then the railway. Poland can also fairly quickly gain another corporation, so I'll want to unlock that tech as well. After that, pharmacy, which should give me access to a modern healthcare system. However, this order might change depending on how effectively I manage to push through legal reforms. Next up is diplomacy. I'll immediately start improving relations with both Prussia and Austria, no need to bother with Russia. I already have pretty good relations with them from the start, which is actually kind of strange. I designate interest zones toward Belarus and the Dnieper region. I slightly increase the tax burden because I need to start building up the country quickly. We'll lower it back to standard later on. As for consumption taxes, it's not really worth applying any for now. Next, it's time to sign a new treaty with Russia. What I care about most is a treaty allowing the flow of goods. Thanks to that, even without seaports, I'll gain access to the global market. In earlier patches, playing Poland without access to the sea was a nightmare. Our trade was basically limited to just 3 countries in the entire world. But with this option, I can trade globally. Besides that, I'll import a ton of wood and wheat from Russia to get cheap food. and in return I'll be supplying them with paper and furniture. Let's hope I don't go bankrupt on this deal. Unfortunately, I need to spend my obligation to make the agreement go through. Luckily, the Russians accepted. And only now should my goods start flowing through the trade center. They should be delivered to the world market and also brought in from it to my country. As for construction, I'll start by building 3 construction sectors in Warsaw. Not more, otherwise I'll go bankrupt. Then a couple of government buildings too should be enough, because as Poland I still have some income to unlock from my territories. But I'm losing it right now due to missing 45 bureaucracy points. And look at this, only now is my trade capacity being used to transfer goods. Before this, it wouldn't have worked at all. This is a fantastic change introduced in the latest patch, allowing landlocked countries in the middle of the continent to be playable. Production methods, here I won't go wild, I'm sticking with the absolute basics. Especially when it comes to tool production and construction methods, I'm not upgrading those just yet. Although I noticed that, as Poland, I can switch to a better production method for my government administration. So I've just done that now. Next, I'm placing another government building in Płock and 2 more construction sectors in Warsaw. I think I can afford them after all. Once those construction sectors are finished, I'll build 2 logging camps, no more than that. And then maybe 3 iron mines. Actually, in the meantime, I'll add some trade centers to the construction queue because I already hit the cap. In Warsaw, I want the lumber mills to produce only regular wood, so I'm disabling the special production method. Oh, the voting system just changed, awesome! Okay, and I see I'll need to change my research queue after all. Right now, public healthcare is being supported by the Catholics. No idea why that is. So if you know what causes that to change, let me know in the comments. I'm adjusting the queue so that pharmacy is now second, the rest will be researched after that. The next law I'll be enacting is the dedicated police force. It has solid support, and it'll definitely come in handy later. Okay, the first iron mine is built, so I'm switching tool production methods to iron tools. The first election just ended, and to be honest, I'm putting the militarists in the government for now. Even though that'll make it a weaker cabinet, but it'll probably allow me to reform the army later on. I'm still making a profit, so I'm adding 2 more construction areas. And I still haven't collected the taxes in Warsaw and Płock, but that seems to be due to traditionalism from what I can tell. That's the economic system. And to get rid of it, I first need to abolish serfdom. And to do that, I have to strengthen the peasant movement. So I'll go ahead and support them after all. And honestly, I've got the basics down for now. With 30 construction capacity, I'm running a small deficit, but that should soon improve. So my next step is to found a company. Under one of my previous videos, I had a pretty interesting discussion about these companies and how it's generally not worth creating construction corporations or those focused on building materials. That's because I want those materials to be as cheap as possible, whereas corporations want them to be expensive to maximize profits. So today I'll play a little differently than in the Sweden episode. Someone suggested I go for companies in textiles or basic goods, so furniture factories or glassworks. Out of curiosity, I checked and my neighbors are severely lacking in furniture and clothing. And if I remember right, China is a great market for those products too. So the first company I'll found will be one that produces basic goods, especially since you can expand it with logging camps through company charters. To found this company, I need to have 5 buildings, specifically 5 furniture factories or glassworks in a single province, in this case Warsaw. And I'll build 4 more such factories in Warsaw, right after I finish building a few farms here. Oh nice, a pro-Prussian lobby just formed, and it's backed by the intelligentsia too. I can already imagine the comments under this video. The atmospheric engine, this is a turning point. So now I need to add 1 or 2 coal mines to the construction queue. Coal is super important for upgrading extraction methods, which lets me mine even more coal. Okay, yeah, it's not used in coal mines themselves because that would be silly to need coal in a coal mine, but it's used basically everywhere else. This effectively doubles my output, and this is also a good moment to introduce more modern production methods in my factories. Another election, and I think it'll change something in the country. For now, I'm putting the peasants and the intelligentsia into the government. Unfortunately, that's going to hit my national stability, but it will let me pull off a certain trick related to passing laws. As you know, I have an active peasant movement in my country and I'm already boosting it, it's pretty strong. To push it even further, while trying to abolish serfdom, I'll attempt to pass the homesteading law. Now I wait 1 week to pass, and here's the important part, I interrupt the process, because that will radicalize the peasant movement and strengthen its influence in the country, which makes it much easier to pass the more basic law, tenant farmers. Look, before it had 20% support, now it's 54%. I hope that was a cool trick for you and that it'll come in handy. Because what I really cared about was abolishing serfdom. I also built the first university in Warsaw. And yes, it's actually worth building universities one or two at a time now. They're not that expensive to maintain anymore. They only employ 1,000 people instead of 5,000 like before. But they also only give 2 innovation points, unfortunately. Still, if you look closely, literacy is growing very quickly in my country. That's why it's worth adding 1 to 2 universities every so often, especially since I'd need about 20 levels total right now. And look how fast I managed to pass tenant farming basically within 6 months. Now I'm working on government reform again because it'll reduce the number of rebels for a while. Mainly, it's the government support that affects how many radicals you generate in the country. I also got an interesting opportunity. I can invite a modernist to my country, and that should spark a new political movement. I'm not entirely sure how it works yet, so if you know, please explain it in the comments. From what I read on Wikipedia, there's a percentage chance of it happening. Maybe I also need to make that agitator the leader of the intelligentsia. Unfortunately, the next election is in 3 years, so in the meantime I'll need to pass a useful law. I think I'll focus on bureaucracy. Elected bureaucrats are great for larger countries because they reduce institution costs. Appointed bureaucrats, on the other hand, increase my tax efficiency, so I might be able to collect more revenue. As a country, I already own 5 furniture factories, so I'm founding a new corporation. It's actually quite productive, so I'll just let it grow for now. Only once it reaches maximum productivity will I start paying subsidies to boost furniture exports. I also renegotiated a new trade agreement with Russia. Now I get a lot more wood and other resources I need. I signed a treaty with Prussia too, so I can sell off some of that wood, which puts me in a pretty solid surplus. Another important thing is preparing for a change in construction method. I want to switch to iron-framed buildings. So I'll build an extra mine and 2 tool factories. Going back to my company, I forgot to grant it rights to own logging camps and to invest capital. Also, keep an eye on whether your cap for global trade is used up. If it is, you'll need to build more trade centers. Those are bottlenecks that will slow down your economic development. And just look at how positively a few new trade centers impacted Poland's GDP. It shot up by 400,000 almost instantly. Okay, I finished researching pharmaceuticals, so I'm temporarily cancelling the bureaucracy reform. There are more important things to implement right now, like public healthcare, which is supported by clergy. I also withdrew a few decrees to speed up the law process, plus 14% is always something. And I just noticed I still had a decree for basic resources active here. Let's switch that to manufacturing industry. Perfect! Public healthcare got enacted very quickly, and I can already start upgrading that institution to level 4, I just need more bureaucracy points. So I'm building more government buildings. Hey, honestly, I didn't know that more bureaucracy increases construction efficiency. Okay, my company reached max productivity, so I can now become a producer of prestige goods. Well, almost. I'm the 4th largest producer in the world. But reaching 3rd place will be very difficult. I'd have to surpass India, which has millions more in population and is very wealthy. Once my corporation reaches max productivity, I'll start scaling back export subsidies, eventually down to 0. And back to public healthcare, look how positively its development impacted Poland's population growth. Over 2%, that's a lot. Although that's probably mostly because living conditions in Poland are still pretty rough. But over time, that will change. The development of railways is another milestone for Poland. After that, I'll mostly focus on researching industry to make it more effective and efficient. As for the railways themselves, I'm immediately building one in Warsaw and I'll be using wooden passenger carriages. Soon, I'll also be able to found another corporation. So I plan to expand textiles in Warsaw to level 5. Another very important turning point, I managed to recruit an agitator who turned out to be a free market liberal. Of course, he was part of the landowners' interest group and I made him the leader of the entire party. So once I pass the National Guard law, since the petite bourgeoisie wanted it, I'll continue with the economic reform of Poland. I've researched the tech that lets me establish another company, so yes, I'm immediately founding the Polish sweatshop. Although, to be honest, I did consider whether the livestock-focused company would have been better. It technically focuses on cattle, but I can still add textile factories to it. Plus, that company boosts factory productivity. The only downside is that the prestige good in that case would be meat, which is a far less attractive product than high-end clothing. Besides, this way I'll have fewer radicals. There's no point expanding industrial rights since I don't have plantations or silk farms. Privatization doesn't make sense either, so maybe investment laws, but I'll wait for a free company charter. Alright, I've passed the National Guard law, which satisfied the demands of the petite bourgeoisie. And that basically allows me to push through another critical reform. So I'm changing the government even though there hasn't been an election, because I need to get rid of traditionalism as fast as possible. And I think I'll switch straight to laissez-faire, although I'm not entirely sure if that's the best move. But considering the size of my investment pool, I think it might finally let me properly scale Poland's development. I won't lie, I'm running into a bit of a problem. My population growth is higher than what I can convert into workers. This is probably the first time I've encountered this in one of my campaigns. Laissez-faire passed and look at that, instantly plus 20,000. So I can add more construction sectors, starting in Warsaw. My next step is to try introducing separation of church and state, because I need that in order to implement public schooling. Just look at the jump, I've practically doubled my construction capacity. That basically makes me the 17th richest country in the world, still a lot behind Belgium and Spain though. Wow, I can't believe I managed to pass that law so quickly. Public schools should be much easier now. I'm having bad luck with passing the public school law, 94%, and still no debate has started. Now 95%, come on! It really should have passed already. And now that I've reached this stage of development, it's basically a vertical line of growth. It's time to renegotiate all my trade agreements. I still need huge imports of fabric and wood from the Russians, because my entire industry basically depends on buying those cheap raw materials from them. These new treaties will temporarily make me lose a bit on diplomatic pacts, but I'm about to massively expand my textile industry. I'll basically have to double its output. And once I finish with schools, I'll start implementing a new tax system. I'm hoping that'll help me maintain all the universities I've relocated to Płock. In the meantime, I've already become the third largest chair producer in the world, which means I now offer them in a premium variant. And honestly, I'm selling so many of them that I think I'll impose tariffs on them. That's a few thousand extra in the budget after all. Even with the tariffs, my exports keep growing. I'm supplying more and more chairs to the global market. Let's hope it stays that way. The new tax system gives me even more income. And basically a year later, I double my construction capacity again. Now I'll research a few key industrial technologies, like dynamite for the mines. Then I'll dive into Polish nationalism, and it's time to catch up on military tech. I hope I'll soon be able to conduct my first wars on my own, because I do have a fair few territories I'd like to conquer. Finally, something's moving in the diplomatic sphere. Prussia no longer likes Russia and is now finally hostile toward Austria. Unfortunately, the Austria-Russia defensive pact still stands, and Austria also has an alliance with France. Now I'll also aim to abolish censorship, because it reduces the ability for technologies to spread naturally, so it's honestly doing more harm than good. And to be honest, I now have a government that strongly supports this. And basically, after just 2 years, Poland has become the 10th largest economy in the world. I've overtaken Belgium, and soon I'll surpass Austria, Spain, and even the United States. Just look at the production path my private sector has, it's expanding at an incredible pace. I think I'm breaking my own records now when it comes to expanding the trade center. For the first time, I'm going to break 100 and Warsaw still wants more. That's why I've decided to introduce free trade. Honestly, things are going so well that I can start recruiting the Polish army and also expand the military industry. And I'll begin right after my explosive materials factories and a few more universities are built. And finally, it happened. The first Prussian-Austrian war has just broken out. It's a shame I don't have an army, because I might have been able to make something out of this. But even so, it should change a lot. Whew, building up the Polish army took me a while, until 1880 in fact. But I've got almost 200,000 troops now, which doesn't exactly help my budget. I'm also having trouble with ammunition and artillery supplies, and during wartime, consumption doubles. So it'll be expensive. Now I'm facing my first workforce shortages. They're finally running out, pretty much everywhere, except Warsaw. So in some areas I'm starting to switch to production methods that require less population. To go to war, I need to drop relations with Russia or Austria below 20, while I'm trying to maintain positive relations with Germany. Yes, Prussia won the unification war. I also need to arrange transit rights with Germany and sell them a few things, maybe buy something in return. Hopefully the treaty lasts around 15 years. Now I'm also carrying out a massive expansion of the arms industry. And not even a year later, an opportunity arose. Russia went to war with the German Federation and England. So now I'm going to sign a few military assistance treaties. They offer really good bonuses, and honestly, I should have done it much earlier. I'm not entirely sure if those pacts stack, but I'd love it if they did. In all of my provinces, I'm also issuing the training edict. Both of my armies are set up like this, and here's how their divisions are divided. It's possible I'll also merge these armies during the war. Unfortunately, I didn't get any generals who are strong offensively. but I do have a few with cautious advance, which reduces casualties. I'm setting a war goal, taking Grodno from Russia. Probably not more than that, because Austria will support Russia in this war anyway, so I need to take that area quickly. Besides, Grodno already gave me 35 infamy, and there it is, Austria joined the war. But I'm ignoring them and ordering both of my armies to attack Grodno. I want to take advantage of my temporary edge on the front. Actually, I've already lost that edge. Alright, switching to defense. The only upside here is that Austrian and Russian armies are already exhausted and weaker than mine. And you can see it in the first clashes. I probably won't have much trouble pushing them back. The only issue is the losses. Will I have enough manpower to replenish and launch an offensive later? Just after the first few battles, the situation at the front shifts in my favor. But it's still not time to push. A year later, Austria pulls out of the war and I need to replenish my armies. I'm keeping one army at the front, the one in better shape, and pulling the other back to the base for faster recovery. Then I rotate them. But I'm doing it only because I see my defense is way stronger than Russia's and they can't break through. So they're suffering massive losses. You can already see it on the war summary, although not as high as I expected. Once I get a solid advantage, over 25%, I go on the offensive. Strangely, I'm attacking with fairly small units, I don't know why. Luckily, the front is still creeping forward. And in the end, I win the war and capture one territory. But honestly, I'm not sure it was worth it, looking at how my GDP plummeted and how much debt I racked up. After this war, something also bugged out. Literally all my production methods reset to the most basic ones. That might be why my GDP took such a massive hit. And now I think the First World War is breaking out. Only the British are on the wrong side. Technically, this is a war for the unification of Germany, which complicates my situation a bit. But anyway, 10 years have passed. I managed to get Poland's GDP back on track. Though, as you can see, it wasn't easy. I also expanded my armies. They now number 160,000 troops, mostly increasing infantry and artillery. I left cavalry at the same level, and I upgraded the mobilization methods a bit more. Field hospitals are also crucial. A small tip, between wars, it's usually best to turn off hospitals, they're a massive expense. Just look, opium cost me 26,000. My next war will be with Russia, because I finally want to gain access to the sea. And honestly, I'm hoping Germany will back me. Okay, maybe it's not obvious here, but there's a good chance that if Austria sides with Russia, since they still have a defensive pact, Germany, which doesn't exactly like them, will join my side in the war. And I did it. The Germans are on my side with the Austrians on the opposing side. Unfortunately, I had to promise Riga to the Germans. But in addition, I'll try to release Hungary from the Austrians. If I manage to do that, the country will basically collapse. Galicia, Volhynia, I simply want to conquer them. From Russia, a free Ukraine, I'll probably conquer that later as well. And that's pretty much it, since I didn't have any more war goals left. And it worked out nicely, we'll have one long shared front, which means I'll be supporting German operations. Oh, but my budget! Yeah, it's mostly due to the lack of ammunition. Austria should be the easier country to beat, so first I'll go for Vienna, or at least I'll try. I'll be using the same tactic I showed you earlier in Sweden. I'll wait for the Germans to launch attacks along the front line first, since we have numerical superiority. And only once several battles are underway will I send in my troops. Let the fun begin. Alright, this army distribution is really strange. 3 battles with 200,000 troops each, it seems they're fielding more than the enemy has at the front, but whatever, this is a massive battle and I think I'm winning it. I'm inflicting slightly heavier casualties on the Austrians. The artillery advantage is definitely showing I'm gaining more ground on the front because they're suffering massive losses. And look how this is calculated, this is one of those changes I had no clue about. Since there's a German-Austrian border, I no longer have to march from my border to Austria's capital. Nope, I can already start occupying from there. Really interesting system, that would explain why the Austrians are defending this area so fiercely. From what I can tell, Austrian support for the war is dropping fast, but will it fall below 0? I'm not sure. So just in case, I'm sending my armies toward my war goals after capturing Vienna. And it's a good thing I did, because their war support stopped at exactly 0. Luckily, the Germans are also pushing the front toward Ukraine, and I'm heading for Budapest. Austria capitulated, and I basically caused its collapse. And Russia, now left alone, will surrender soon as well. Something occurred to me, I think I can sign an alliance with Germany. I can't believe it, but I'll ally with them by buying dynamite and supplying them with clothes and a few trains. And I think it should last for at least 25 years. Or actually, let's say 15. Because I just noticed it's already 1892. Since Russian war support is dropping, I'm switching my armies to defense mode. and I gained quite a lot from the Russians as well. Since the war was costly and I'm buried in debt, I'm immediately lowering army supply. I simply can't afford it right now. But finally, having gained access to the sea, I can define my interests globally. I just need a much larger trade fleet. Now I'm mostly focused on paying down my debt to get it as low as possible. And I've signed a few more favorable treaties with neighboring countries because several new ones popped up nearby. Unfortunately, my overseas trade won't be functioning for now. I need to increase my convoys, but there's no point building them while this province is so unstable. Constructing ports literally takes years. In the meantime, I've also developed all institutions to the maximum level. 5 years have passed, so I can begin conquering the smaller nations I had previously released. First in line, Galicia and Volhynia. This will give me a lot of infamy, but I think it's time for it. Luckily, Russia will be on the opposing side again, and I'll call in my ally Germany. To be honest, Germany will probably win this war for me. I'll just send my armies to the front to increase our advantage. Galicia and Volhynia were captured shortly after, and now we're heading for the Russians. I'm just sitting on my ass paying off my debt. The war was won, and now there are even more countries around me. Next, I carried out another tax reform. This time it's proportional, which gives me a solid income and allows me to repay my debt. Thankfully, the interest has dropped by almost half. That's thanks to the fact that I've become one of the world's major powers. However, I have a classic Polish problem. There's about to be a coup in my country because the capitalists are dissatisfied. They just want to overthrow the monarchy and implement a new system. I could try passing a new law to appease them, like commercial farms or a different voting system, but I noticed that ideas like parliamentarism, a presidential republic, or another form of government I've never tried before also have strong support, specifically the corporate state. And I won't lie, it looks interesting. Only the church, which has little influence anyway, is against it. Surprisingly, all the other estates support it heavily. I like this system, it gives you an extra company, and those are incredibly strong. Thanks to that, coup support is starting to drop month by month. I also managed to sign a few beneficial treaties. Look, I'm making 520,000 from them, they cost me 416,000, so that's a 100,000 profit. Sometimes even 150,000, depending on how the monthly numbers play out. Though I have to admit, a calculator to track these deals would be helpful. I also developed new building construction methods and am slowly switching to steel-based structures. I'm doing it in such a way that the private sector can keep up with building the required factories. Before researching further military tech, I need to develop the radio. It's basically essential for all the better military units. I'm also expanding universities in Eastern Galicia. It's the only place where I still have a decent population. Just to reach the maximum level of innovation I can get, around 150 points. And the new government system has been implemented. Okay, it's led by a radical president. This will be fun. Thanks to that, I also got the option to establish another company, and honestly, it's hard to choose anything. So I'll probably go with the corporation that boosts my army's offense. I'm almost certain that will come in handy. And democracy has been saved. Sort of. They wanted a presidential republic and now they have a corporate state. My next step will be introducing a census suffrage system. Since more wars are on the horizon, I'm upgrading my infantry to trench infantry, and here's what my mobilization methods look like now. I won't lie, right now, the worst part for me is the infamy, the notoriety system in this game. I don't get it, but taking just one province costs 30 points, I feel like I'm trying to conquer Italy in Europa Universalis 4. And every war is against one of the great empires. If I wanted to take Kiev, I'd have to pay an extra 40 points of aggressive expansion. That's way too much for a single province. But hey, who am I to complain? Luckily, this war won't be hard anyway. Wow, my artillery is absolutely roasting them. They're melting before my eyes. No, this is a total collapse. Late game artillery is just insane. Look how fast their numbers drop, and the AI barely builds any. The Ukrainian front is practically empty already. That was a quick war. The newly conquered territory is immediately incorporated, and more importantly, I've started building electric factories there. Once they're up and running, I'll upgrade all artillery to siege artillery. It's so much better, look, 25% kill rate, plus 20 devastation, 55 offense. Wait, hold on, mortars have a 30% kill rate? You know what? I'll go with a mix of both. Poland has become a producer of prestige weapons, and now I'm working on prestige dynamite. And honestly, I think it's time to end my alliance with Germany. Sure, they have the second best army in the world, but maybe I can improve relations with France. Mass conscription might help with that. Realistically, I'll have to wait 8 to 10 years before the next war with Germany, so maybe I'll manage to unlock tanks by then. As Poland, I can have one conscript battalion. Wow, I'm really curious how that's calculated because there's no proper info anywhere. By the way, the Warsaw region now has 11 million people, and 66 million of my GDP comes from there. That's almost 40% of my entire income, from just one province. Before going to war with Germany, I created another army, making me the 6th greatest power in the world. Not great, since Germany is number 2. But honestly, their power comes from conscripts. When I look at their army, it's a weird mix, some old, some new. They don't seem to have any of the latest artillery at all. I'm also curious about the quality of their mobilization. I've got everything for bonuses to offense, defense, better maneuvering, battlefield intel. I even developed shock infantry, which boosts combat stats overall, plus 5% to enemy kill rate, and soon I'll unlock another type of infantry that's even better offensively. Germany wants an alliance. To quote a classic Danzigor War. The worst part is that Poland gets this Christ of Nations modifier, but honestly it doesn't really do anything. It should give special casus belli to reclaim former Commonwealth territory with reduced aggressive expansion. That's how it should work in my opinion. Especially since Byzantium has something similar. Oh, women's rights. Sounds like hate speech. I'll introduce full women's rights this time, including voting. I think, but I won't lie, my population size is already massive, and if I can convert an extra 30% into workers, my army could get even bigger. Do women serve in the military then? Especially now that Poland is basically a land of milk and honey, practically the second best country in the world, wherever this Limburg is. Limburg. Right, between the Netherlands and Belgium. I've developed new infantry, squad infantry or something like that, as well as new methods for training volunteers, so that's definitely going to come in handy, especially for conscript regiments. As soon as the units get upgraded, I'll launch the attack. I can call the United States into this war, I think I'll do it. Especially since, wait, is that Great Britain on the opposing side? Why? Okay, this is going to be a bigger war than I thought. But at least I've got a few countries on my side too, thankfully. Only now my PC is dying. Oh my god, this is running so slow. Honestly, looking at the world map right now, I think I just started World War I, and I might be having some minor ammunition issues. Right before the diplomatic play ends, I add Poznan to my war goals, which means I'll gain the final 2 provinces I need to form the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. Time for the First World War. And now that I'm looking at it, unfortunately, my enemies have really high defense too. I've got very high offense, but maybe not enough. But my general is an artillery commander, so that means our cannons will fire more effectively and deal greater manpower losses. Same goes for my second commander, actually. And just look at the casualties I'm causing. German manpower is dropping fast, while mine's untouched. On the southern front, in Moldova, I'm fighting the British, but honestly it feels like they don't even have an army here. The Swedes are struggling a bit more, but I'm willing to pay that price. Poznan and West Prussia are captured, so Polish troops to Berlin. The only major problem I have in this war, and it's not exactly surprising, is that the British have sunk all my convoys, which might cost me all my trade agreements, and if that happens, my economy will probably collapse. So yeah, Poland definitely needs a navy. The problem is I don't really have anywhere to build one with only a single coastal province. And check this out, when I engage with Russian forces, I'm basically just wiping out most of their army. And if you didn't know, here's how it works. Once you get a dead soldier, you need to train a new one to replace them. If they're just wounded, 40% of them, if you've got field hospitals, return straight to the front line. Speaking of the front, there's barely any German army left here. And another fun thing, look at my army in Sweden. Its organization is plummeting. Not because of poor infrastructure or anything, it's because Great Britain is blocking my ability to supply that army since my capital is located elsewhere. So yeah, I need a navy. Saying it again. So I have to withdraw my army from Sweden because they won't accomplish anything with such low organization. Ah yes, women's rights. But seriously, where are my workers, I ask you? Anyway, Germany is losing this war because I've already achieved the war goals. Now it's just a matter of holding on. I sent my third army back to the barracks to recover organization. You won't believe these, but the United States is losing its war on the Mexican border. And I think this is the first time I have ever seen the Confederate States of America. Also, I just unlocked flamethrowers, and the war is won, I think. And so, in the year 1917, the Commonwealth was formed, a glorious union. Hey, I'm getting more claims. The new Commonwealth. The Commonwealth of Poland-Lithuania has been restored, undoing decades of subjugation and partition. While the Polish and Lithuanian people now enjoy freedom from Russian and German rule, we must consider whether to extend our dominion to liberate Ukrainian and Belarusian lands as well. Well, I think the bigger the Commonwealth, the better. So there are still a few wars ahead of me. The newly acquired territories are unfortunately already fully developed. and it looks like a large portion of the population has moved away, so they're not exactly valuable lands. Silesia, on the other hand, I definitely want to take that, and I think I'll do it in 5 years. That's why I've developed airplanes for my armies. Time for the first flight. I'll also build the world's first skyscraper to boost Poland's prestige. And now I wait for my infamy to drop. But before I go to war with Germany, I'll strike Ukraine first. And even though reclaiming the territory costs very little in aggressive expansion, I still end up with over 75 total. And honestly, I've sent troops into this war that cost a fortune to maintain, but we'll see how they perform. 2 arms. Okay, I have to admit I'm going a bit overkill here, and I mean literally, it's melting. Look what I'm doing to the Austrian troops, 8,000 wounded, 68,000 dead. After one battle they have no chance, they've already lost half their army. It basically turned into a blitzkrieg, just without the tanks. Meanwhile, I'm also building a modern fleet to defend the Baltics in the future, because I have a feeling that the next war with Germany for the final 2 provinces I need could turn into a much larger conflict. Just waiting for aircraft carriers now. Yes, I'm going to build 10 aircraft carriers in the Baltic Sea. Also, I've gained my first ace pilot. I decided to go to war with Ukraine first for a very simple reason. Ukraine's most valuable resource for me is its people. There are a few million in population that I can send into my modern factories to work with tanks, planes or radios. Wait, am I reading this right? My army is getting plus 30 offense? That's too strong. And even more effective flamethrowers. The world will burn. And finally, the reclaimed lands. But why do they take 5 years to integrate? Seriously? And they cost a fortune. But hey, conquering Ukraine has made Poland the second most powerful country in the world. Germany can't even compete. My future tank factories are already under construction. Perfect timing too, I'll have tanks in 11 months. Although, to be honest, only one of my armies will probably be fully armored. They're insanely expensive to maintain. Unfortunately, while I can upgrade infantry into mechanized troops within existing units, when it comes to artillery and tanks, I have to recruit new battalions and disband the old ones. The first skyscrapers have been built in Warsaw. I won't even say how that looks, but the armies are ready, the tanks are here, so it's time to reclaim Silesia from Germany. For just 8 infamy points. Why couldn't I do it like this from the start? Turns out Germany is already at war. It's a British-American war actually. Looks like the British are trying to reclaim their old colonies. This might be another huge war, only this time I'll have to manage on my own. And as they say, fighting a 2-front war is a bad idea. That's why I've got 4. The armies are in position, it's time to declare war. My opponent has, well, 6 times more forces than I do, maybe I can handle it. Looking at the stats, my army is probably the best in the world. Even my carrier fleets have set sail to protect my trade routes. Wow, one battle and the entire region is captured. With such a strong offensive advantage, there's no point defending. What a massacre! What a massacre I'm creating here. Just look at those casualties, and this is only the beginning of the war. Polish troops are back under the gates of Berlin. On both my fronts I've dealt such massive losses to the enemy that I actually have the upper hand now. They have no chance of winning this war, and Germany's GDP has just collapsed. They should really add nuclear weapons to Victoria, and the war is won. Though I do miss some kind of final summary, there's no screen showing German or Russian losses anymore. The Second Advent. Defying the partitions, Poland has made a miraculous return to the world stage. But as the eyes of the nation are fixed upon its future, President Konopczynski looks toward its past. Poland has been reborn, but which? The Piast idea? The Jagiellonian vision? We all know how Poland for Poles ended, so maybe this time let's try tolerance. Interestingly, those new states are already integrated under me. Let everything recalculate now, because it's time for another great war. My next goal, capturing Minsk from Belarus. I don't know what happened, but I wasn't able to demand any other provinces, even though Belarus is within my sphere of influence. Still, as a bonus, I'll nationalize over 500 companies from the Russians operating inside my country. Definitely worth it. In this war against Russia, I'm not expecting any problems, unless I run out of tanks. But I'm melting through those Russians, just absolutely melting them. The Greater Commonwealth, Corporate Edition. The Ukrainian and Belarusian people have been incorporated into our Commonwealth as equal partners in our great union. Welcome, brothers! Now all that's left is to crush the Russians, and I'm inflicting nearly 10 times more casualties than I'm taking. And there it is, the beautiful word Commonwealth right before our eyes. Too bad it couldn't be achieved more diplomatically or peacefully. Still, in the end, we've become the second most powerful country in the world. If you enjoy games where you can rebuild a mighty Poland, check out my Europa Universalis 4 episode, where I had just 100 years to create a powerful Commonwealth on the hardest difficulty. Which means, for example, the Ottoman Empire had nearly 1 million troops while I barely had 100,000.